Thank you very much for coming to my session. My name is Verghese Kochummen, and I welcome you to my session. It's titled Field Notes, Transforming Integrated Project Controls Platforms by Engaging Disruptive Opportunities. That was a mouthful of a title. It sounded good at the time when I came out with it. So I'll be talking about project controls platforms and some experiences that we had gone through in this past couple of projects that we have taken. So just one slider about me. I have a couple of degrees in electronic engineering and computer science. I've been working pretty much in the software development sector for the past 25 years, and with a more focus on project controls for the past 15 years. So picked up a PMP along the way, and I'm also the principal architect of a solution called Executify. A little bit about Insynchro Australia, my employer. We started up in 1999, and we became a Primavera technical partner in the year 2000. The year 2003, we became a full-fledged reseller, and today we have presence in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, and the United States. One of the larger Primavera teams in the region today, and our unique value proposition, I guess, is that we actually have a development team, a technology team within our operations. So whenever we do any enterprise-level implementations of Primavera, and if there's any gaps that technology can close, we have our own in-house resources to close those gaps for us. So typically, they go from integration services to mobile applications, things like that. We customize to fit the purpose. We've been in this domain for nearly 2 decades now, and we know the product pretty well. So much so that we have come out with our own list of products, and one of them is called the Insynchro Integration Manager, which we use for integration services between Primavera and other applications in the ecosystem. So it's been used for more than a decade, so very robust platform, very well received in the oil and gas sector especially. Kind of excited right now because the next couple of months we'll be launching the cloud version, so that allows us to shuffle data in a much more higher volume. So if I'm not sure if you're understanding about the terms called elastic computing. So in the cloud, as the load comes up, you can actually increase the computing resources. So you're able to do more. And when the demand goes down, they shrink it back. So that's the new architecture that we are moving with. Right, the presentation outline. Let me just keep tab of my time so I don't go across the next person's agenda. So I'll be presenting the business case on why there should be an integrated project controls platform established in an organization. I'll talk about the 3 dimensions of control that we found to be very useful when establishing such a platform, and then I'll be sharing some field notes from a property development use case. So here's the business case, the points. There's no need for a solution if you don't have any pains, right? So the pain points that we typically encounter for the clients that we actually implemented this platform for, most of them are ISO certified. They predominantly understand the need for process and procedures, but they're all doing it manually today. They don't really have a quality management system in place. So another observation that we found is that most of these processes are department-centric. They don't really cross the boundaries of the department. So that kind of lacks the enterprise-wide oversight and the accountability that you typically need when you're running a project. So when you do not have the ability to have different parts of your organization participating in your project processes, you do hit some efficiency factors. Let's take, for instance, reconciliation. It's not an easy task. Many people do it manually simply because data is coming in from various applications, and they don't always jive. So you have a pretty tedious and laborious task of bringing it all together, and you'll also find that most of the senior people in the project team actually involved. And these are, when I say senior, I mean expensive resources and doing data shuffling, essentially. So despite the high effort that they put in, they still find that the reports are coming in late, and it's still got a lot of inaccuracies that is not reliable for decision making. So I'm going to dive into the systems overview. What did we use for our integrated project controls platform? So our solution used the Oracle Primavera Unifier. This is an application that provides the enterprise class workflows. So if you need to develop any workflows that cuts across all the organizations. In fact, it doesn't even stop within the organization. The ones that we have implemented actually extends out to the contractors as well. So it's pretty easy to do workflows. There's no configuration needed. You would only do a drag drop, create your workflow, develop your forms, and associate it to the steps. It also comes with cost and contract management modules, which also provides the cash flow and DMS features. Then we have Primavera P6 for the scheduling perspective. So you got the scope management, resource management, schedule, and also the forecast. And on the top, we have our own tool called Executive Eye. And Executive Eye is where revenue management is performed. And it aggregates the cost and schedule information from Unifier and P6. And we provide what is called timeline analytics with the 3 control dimensions. So I'll be demonstrating that shortly. And all the clients that we go to, there's always a back-end ERP system, a CRM system, as well as a CAD system. So before I delve into the details of our solution, I just wanted to keep in mind, what is the end game that we're trying to achieve? So we are still, whatever you do, it has to align to the company's needs. So companies need to develop and work a business plan. They need to make the money. They need to pay the overheads. They need to make a profit. And they need to grow. So whatever you're doing has to be in alignment with this mission. So we came up with this concept of a project economic model where there's 3 dimensions of control. So they are schedule, cost, and revenue. So project economics in our terms basically is you have the x-axis as the time, and you have the cost on your y-axis. The 3 dimensions of control is schedule, the cumulative cost, and cumulative revenue. So the schedule kind of gives you the timeline. You're going to start the project at this point, and you're going to finish it at this point. And along the way, you're going to be spending some money. And also along the way, you're going to also be generating some revenue. So when you map all those numbers together, you'd be getting the typical break-even curve. So this break-even curve is pretty much the motivation of the business, why you're doing the project. So in the initial stage, you'll be spending your money to develop the project, and then after that, you would be going into the revenue generation, which is either production or operations, and that's where you generate your revenue. So as you accumulate your cost and revenues together, when they equal the same, that's when you hit the break-even point, and then you should be in net positive territory after that. So aside from the health, safety, environment factors, this should be the curve that influences most of your other project decisions. It should be in line with achieving this curve. Just going to quickly go through some of the implementations in the different sectors. So in oil and gas, for instance, you would have the field development plan, the front-end engineering, the detailed design, the fabrication, hookup and commissioning, and finally you start to drill. So up to that point, most of the oil and gas companies doing upstream projects, they don't get any kind of revenue. But the moment they hit their first oil or first gas, then revenue starts kicking in. And that's when they hand over the asset over to the production team. So the production team then takes over. I'm going to cover a little bit on the property development sector. So for them, their curve looks like this. You got the first cash outlays for land acquisition. So they will purchase the land, and then they will look at the market research, what are the kinds of properties that people are looking for in that particular area, and they'll define the kinds of properties to develop there, and then they'll come up with a concept design. The concept design is sent to the councils to get it approved, and upon approval, then they start doing the real work. They do the detailed design, they develop the CAD models for it. A difference here is that they actually do a launch. They actually sell these properties before they actually start the construction. So the ability for them to break even actually is a lot easier because they are already making revenue before even completing the construction stage. So let's look at how will all of this look in a situation where, let's say you're running an oil and gas company and you have oil and gas assets across the whole nation. Now, each of these assets are projects on their own. Each of them have got their own break-even curves. They don't start at the same time, they don't end at the same time. So for somebody at the corporate planning level, to get all this information aggregated from different teams and putting them together is actually a very useful insight for their planning. So when you put all these different projects together and put them against a common timeline, so what you will be getting out is a pretty wobbly curve, something that actually aggregates what is your total cost and your total revenue, put them together across time, and well, when you have an integrated project controls platform, that's exactly where you want to be at. You want to be able to pull this information in and show it to the stakeholders at this point. So not only do you get this from your baselines, you will actually be able to track them as the project progresses and see how they're actually performing. So in this case, you can see that it's pretty messed up curves. So at least now it's something that they can get from the system without having to chase each project team for an update. And better yet, it doesn't come in the form of Excel. It comes directly from these different control applications. So this is the kind of decision-making skills that they are able to now look at the non-alignment and then decide, okay, we should be doing a quarterly review of all our targets, and we have to keep revisiting them until we hit some kind of alignment. Okay, so now we're going into the property development use case here. So in a property development, typically what they do is when they buy a land bank, the land bank comprises of multiple land parcels. Now, each land parcel has its own project. So we treat it as a project. They will designate what is the product that's going to be developed inside that particular land parcel. They'll associate a start date and a finish date. The project will come with a cost dimension where you'll be able to define what is the cost breakdown structure, the estimates for those cost codes, what are the budgets, the commits, and then you go into how is this money going to be spent, the cost distribution. So after that contracts are awarded, then you go into the actuals. So you're actually going to make payments on them, and then you're going to be forecasting how you're going to spend the remaining amounts. The same thing happens for revenue. You would be estimating the revenues, you'd be having the revenue distribution, billings is the actual collection of the bills, and then you can project the remaining amounts. So our team typically spends about 6 months to put all of these processes together. I'm not sure if you can read this. I'll just read the blue tops. Those are the main modules there. So it starts from vendor management. The gray boxes below it are all the different business processes that were developed for the company. Then we have the project creation. So project creation is a very, very controlled process. The last thing you want to have is the project existing in one application and not found in the others. So it's a very controlled process where we make sure when the project is created in one application, it's found in the others. Then we have budget estimation, procurement management, contract management, progress payments, project delivery, reporting, and schedule management. So the idea here is that you could use Unifier to come up with any number of workflows to suit yourself, but it's actually a very good idea to do your business process improvements and re-engineering ahead, because this is the opportunity to do them. It's also, I wouldn't say simple, but it's flexible. So you can change your mind, and the change is not going to impact you too much. Another good thing about using tools like Unifier is that you're not locked into the vendor. You can actually pick this up. So in our customers that we have done, we actually have IT folks who actually picked up the tool. So they're able to continue using the tool without having to come back to us. And they come back to us for the more important stuff, like, okay, I need to do some complex things, or I need to do some integration. That's the time that they come in. So it kind of empowers the end users to dictate their own flow. You get the ability to do it yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some highlights on the dimensions. Oh, I'm doing really well in time. That's good. So how will the land parcels look like in Primavera P6? So as I mentioned, each land parcel will become a project. So in P6, you would actually have the EPS node broken up to different regions, and you have your projects listed out there, and it will be put against a timeline. When is it going to start? When is it going to finish? So that's the schedule dimension of your project. Now, for the cost dimension, for each of the project, you're going to have a cost breakdown structure, and you're going to be tracking the amounts for each of those cost codes from the budget to the commits to the actuals. And the third one is on the revenue dimension. So the revenue dimension is where we use the tool Executive Eye. We capture the revenue, and we also capture the billings. So this information comes in from the ERP system, and we bring it all together into one place. Now, obviously, to get all this information, you need to do some data shuffling across these applications, and that's where our Integration Manager solution is used. So in terms of a solution overview, I'm just going to give you a nature of how the data is shuffled in and out. So between Oracle, Primavera, Unifier, P6, the ERP system, and Executive Eye. So the design that we had come out with for this solution stack allows us to update P6 whenever a contract is awarded, or whenever a payment is made on a contract, it will update P6, so you get the updated budgeted cost as well as the actual cost. So what we are doing is we're synchronizing the costs from the solution, from the cost control application. We're synchronizing that with P6, and we are actually getting a cost-loaded P6 schedule. Now, the reason we're doing that is because P6 distributes the remaining costs pretty effectively based on its allocations to the activities, and that helps drive the cash flow that is used in the cost control application. So if you don't have this distribution, what happens is that practically you have to go in every month and reforecast manually. So this information now comes in directly from P6. So on the ERP side, what we have achieved is that we have to synchronize our data sets. Typically, the data sets are budgets. So you would normally find that ERP systems are unable to go down to the level of details when it comes to cost breakdown structures, and that's why people prefer to use Unifier to achieve things like that. So for the most part, all the modeling of cost is done in Unifier. It goes through the approval in Unifier. Once it is accepted or approved, then we synchronize it to the ERP system for the allocations. Then, of course, contracts. So in terms of contracts, again, you got the bill of quantities that you would put into work packages. They go through the reviews inside Unifier, and once it is ready, it will then be sent over to the ERP system for the actual sourcing function. Once the function of sourcing is complete, meaning a contract is awarded, it is then synchronized back into Unifier. So then the project team takes over in terms of managing the post-contract activities. So similarly, we do it for the payments. All the payments are processed inside Unifier, and then you send it out to the ERP system for fulfillment. Variation orders are also synchronized because it affects the budgets. So you need to keep the two systems in the same version of the truth. So for Executive Eye basically is an aggregator of data. It brings the data from P6, from Unifier, even from ERP, and puts them all together. So it's a data aggregator that contextualizes all these different data sets and brings out the perspective of the performance. Okay, so here I'm going to break into the demo. Okay. Whoa. So I'm going to be doing a demo. Can you all hear me? All good? Yeah. So I'm going to be doing a demonstration on Executive Eye. It's kind of hard for me to see as well because if there's a projector here, I can just turn around. But okay, let's go with this. So this is as you're logging into our tool, Executive Eye, you're going to get a geospatial map powered by Google. All these icons you're seeing is actually the locations of the projects where you're performing those projects. So I'm going to go first into satellite mode. And I'm going to show you a portfolio that I have created. So we have a few portfolios that come out automatically. Now bear in mind the data sets are all coming in straight from P6, from Unifier. So there's no user interventions involved here. The data is brought in directly. So the control points that these applications are using is already maintaining the integrity of the data. So whenever we look at the data here, it means that the data has already been through a quality system. So I'm just going to go into one of the portfolios here for property development. So you'll give you all the projects inside that portfolio, and some of them will have color-coded progress. So that's for physical and schedule. So when you click on one of those projects, you will be zoomed, you'll be brought into that particular location. So this is a typical example of a land bank. So the land bank will have parcels land parcels of different shapes, and each parcel is to be treated as a particular property. What kind of property are you designating to develop? Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be developing this property in the next 1 year or 2 years. It could be something within the next 10 years or 20 years. So it must always come with what is your plan. So that will allow your corporate team to know this is the kind of demands that we're going to be looking at, and this is the kind of products that we're going to be delivering to the market. So let's look at one particular property here. It's called demo. So I'll start off with the details here. So you can look into the project scorecard. So this is at the project level. We are able to pull in information again, like I said. It consolidates data. So you have different parts of this scorecard. I'll just go through each one. So when you click into announcements, you can actually see what's the project team's announcements for this project. We actually have a mobile version for this tool, so it comes in iOS and Android as well. So whenever an announcement is made, it comes out as a notification on your mobile app. We have the schedule information. So it'll be color-coded to show your percent completes and whether you're ahead or behind. This data is an example of what we pull out from P6. We pull this out and we display that. And same thing for cost. So we know what's your monthly forecast spend and what is your actuals across the project timelines. Next thing we put is the extension of time and variation orders. So depending on how some clients would prefer to just keep this in an Excel register and then they'll come in and update the system. But if you actually have the business process inside Unifier, then that's the information that we pull out directly. So you can actually click in to see what are the variation order records. So these are typically done for the audience. It's actually for the business audience. They are meant to see things very quickly. We don't want to have multi-layer drill downs because most of them will get lost in the data after a bit. So this is the combined S-curve. We combine the physical and cost in percentage terms, and you can turn on and off the curves that you're interested in. So as you go through the timeline, you can see what the amounts are supposed to be. So if you just want to have a look at the actuals, you can turn off the plans, and you get to see all that information in. So for an executive or a business team, they get to see the information that is sufficient for their consumption, and they are pretty quick in terms of grasping what's the progress. So for the stakeholders who don't want to sit and analyze charts, they can go through the executive narrative. And this is an auto-generated narrative. There's nothing that the user needs to provide. The system will generate this narrative automatically. Then you have the details on the contract. What is the original amount? What are the variation orders approved? What's the revised value? And how much spent, how much remains. Same thing for the contracts, dates, schedule, sorry. So similarly, like you have access to different parts of the project just by clicking onto the carousels. Just going to stop by into the briefing books. So the briefing books are books that you can put together based on our page bank. So you can select different pages for different books, and you can make those books available for different stakeholders. So different stakeholders have got different communication needs. I'm just going to go into the S-curves. So these are data sets that we are able to now present to the users. So you got your physical curve, the cost performance. So we got physical and cost. Then you can just look at the different, just the cost alone and revenue. Now putting it all together, I'm just going to turn off these details here. Because we're keeping time slice data that's distributed across time, you'll be able to look at this project's revenue. What is the revenue and what's the planned cost? This will be the first thing that most of the stakeholders will do, is make sure you're planning it right so that you're actually going to be coming out in the positive. Then you can look at the net, which will figure out the net between the planned values. So because you're also pulling in the actual data, we are able to now bring in your actual performance data as well. So you got the actual revenue, the actual cost, and then we got the net. So this would typically be what the business stakeholders, this is what they want to be able to see. Am I going according to plan? Am I still in the positive territory? So by having all these 3 dimensions of data sitting in one location and bringing it together, this really does help them decide on what's the performance of the project. Is it going well or not? So now let's say that you've got the data. You want to have a look at what's happening on the site. You could bring on actually even the 3D model. You can load it up into this canvas. So Executive Eye is an aggregator of data, not only from applications, but also from other sources, things like cloud applications, site IoT devices. So I could load up the 3D model here, but our client decided it's better to just show a video instead of showing the actual 3D model. So you get an idea of what exactly is going to be constructed over here. You can have the site progress. I'll just put another one here. 3D tour. Okay, I forgot I had already preloaded them so that I don't have to spend time loading up all these details. So I'm just going to go into full screen. So this is an interesting view. You can actually have a 3D scanner in their demo homes. So you can actually see what is the virtual walkthrough of this. So I'll just go into the dollhouse view. You can navigate and go to a particular location, and you can walk through. You get to an appreciation of what exactly is a property that you develop, what's it going to look like. You can navigate that through. It all comes with the VR model as well, so if you want to get the immersive feeling, you can also get into that. Put that in. Now, as the project goes into construction, you get to see what is the progress like. This can be in the form of photos, videos, drone feeds, IP cameras. So if you you can have your monthly updates, and they're full of annotations. And you can also have the time lapse of the construction process to see what has been happening at the construction site. If you're into the drone services, I'm sure many of you would have already experienced things like this, where you can actually get a photogrammetry view of things. So you can put in annotations, what was delivered this month, what was missed this month, what are the environmental risks, things like that can be annotated into this report as you do that. So again, what I've been talking about has so far been about one project. So if you're in the corporate planning team of the organization and you want to now look at the analytics of how the whole land bank as a portfolio is going to be performing, it's going to be a different view that you need to have a look at. So for that, I'm going to go into this tab here, and I'm going to load a portfolio. So let me explain the different portions of the screen. So one is a geospatial map, and this is actually going to show you the parcel locations. So for this whole portfolio, you're already getting the charts. All the data from the different projects have been aggregated together, put against a common timeline, and you can see the cumulative plan cost, revenue, profit, along with their actual counterparts, all together in one chart, but limited to this one particular portfolio of projects. At the bottom left, you'll see the break-even curve. Let me get that. You see the break-even curve. So you would actually see this portfolio, when is it going to break even as a whole, not just at the project level. So in terms of corporate planning, this becomes really important data for them to know what are their targets, are they reaching those targets, and do they need to revise them. There's also now a spread. You can actually see the breakdown of your costs, revenue, profit, and you can calculate the ROI from there. And this will be spread across the years of the portfolio. So one of the key things when it comes to planning at the corporate level is that you need to know how much cash outlay you need to give, and you need to know what projects are actually contributing to that particular weight. So when you run this project timer, this timer runs from the start of the project portfolio, and it builds up the chart as it goes through the timeline. And that gives the construction side. So let's say here, this is one parcel. It's in green. That means this project is now in the concept design phase. And as the time is going by, you can freeze the time at any point. I'll just wait for it to run a little bit more. So it is actually evolving, and you can actually see at that point in time, if you stop, you'll actually be able to see all the metrics across all the projects brought together. So that's why we call the 3 dimensions of control. You need to bring them all together in order for the business to make sense out of it. You could also move to like, okay, I want to move to this particular date. What's it going to look like at that point in time? So the difference here is you are now not just looking at a chart. You're actually able to correlate the chart with what's happening on the site, and you're able to now do some planning. It's like, should I move this particular parcel to a later date to reduce the cost overlay that I have to, or cost outlay that I have to incur as a business? So it becomes more of a business simulation based on the project data that you're able to bring through. Okay. And I think that brings me to the end of the presentation. So we have been participating in a couple of projects, transformation projects. The customers that we are talking to are very much into how do we break the rules without breaking the story. So they engage us to come in and talk with them and say, okay, what are the things that we can do, and how do we move forward in an innovative way without making any real sacrifices. So this is one of the ideas. They're calling it Towards 5D. So we are actually talking with them and collaborating with them. The plan here is that they want to simplify project controls, and they want to make it very methodical. So instead of going down to the nitty-gritty, how much quantities of concrete and steel that you have put in, they would like to go more towards something that you can measure as a deliverable. So if you look into Revit, for instance, you can actually componentize your asset. So when you break that down into components, you can then translate them into deliverables. So if you were to model it in such an approach, what you could do is bring that into Navisworks, and then you can then start to sequence the construction. And once you have sequenced it, then you can push that data into P6. Now, P6 will be more driven by deliverables instead of the real activities. But that is what the client is saying, is that we don't really care about the nitty-gritty activities. We just want to know what's the progress at the deliverable level. So that is something that they're pushing towards, where P6 is now going to be at the level of deliverables, and at the same time, they're trying to see whether they can make it as a contractual line items as well. So each line item is a deliverable that comes with a BQ. So there are a lot more details that you will be doing on the ground, but when it comes to reporting, it comes back to the deliverable level of reporting. The advantage of having something like this in place is that you can just feed this data back into your control applications. It will feed directly into Navisworks, and Navisworks will be able to give you a 5D rendition of where exactly your project is sitting. You'll color code what's in delay or what's completed. So this is the role that we're playing with these transformation projects, where we are actually contributing to them in terms of what can be done, what will be hard, and this journey is not fully complete. They're right now talking to the QS team, the contracts team, trying to determine, can they do it? Are they able to manage it if they were to do it this way? So, yeah, this is where we would like to be engaged with. So if you're looking at establishing a project controls platform, or you want to review or transform your present project delivery practices, you want to explore ideas, just want to push some thoughts back and forth, or you want to do some POCs to see whether the business case is robust, do give us a call. We do find that exciting to be in the forefront of such innovation. Just as a closing, I'll just want to show you how the Executive Eye is used by one of our clients. So this is a geospatial map of an elevated highway, and what we do, so what they're doing is, this is typically what happens. Oh, you're not seeing it. Oh, 1 second. Okay. So this is the boardroom briefings that this particular client does. They are an elevated highway developer. We normally sell our solution with a 65-inch touchscreen Samsung, By the end of this project, they got 5 touchscreens. Every general manager wanted to have one of these in their rooms because they're able to interrogate every work package through the touchscreen. And it's not complicated, it's quite intuitive. If you know how to use a mobile phone, you most likely would be able to use this application as well. So very interactive, very responsive to your touchscreens, and you get to move on your own. So one of the things that when we designed this tool, we had to make sure it is user-friendly to the level that business stakeholders are able to do their own presentations. And that's exactly what is happening over here. You're actually having business stakeholders instead of the project controls team do that. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions? So I did come in early. I was very worried that I will be going past my timeline. Yes?
The slide that showed...
Yeah.
The slide that showed the executive summary, you mentioned that that was system generated.
Yes.
Could you talk a little more about that, please?
Okay. So I'll just bring that slide up. Yeah. So the auto-generated summary, basically what it does is, if you notice that there's words in bold and there's unbolded sentences, basically what it's doing is it's pulling the data in bold, and it's just putting it in the form of sentences. So it becomes a quick narrative for the stakeholders who don't want to be analyzing any charts. You don't have to prepare that report. It'll automatically pull it out on its own. So it's something quick, and it's always the latest information. Get that. Yep. Any other questions? All good? Thank you very much then. Cheers.